Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Linsey, and I am here to share my story tonight. My story intrigues people, and no joke, I've been told multiple times to write a memoir. But I'm a little busy right now, being a mom and a student, so tonight is my opportunity to share without writing a book. I do want you to know that I am here with an agenda. I am hoping that I will change the way that you think about emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is sneaky and hard to define, but according to experts, it may be the most common form of abuse that children experience. However, victims of abuse do not have to stay victims. They can be empowered to seek help if they know what to look for. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I have been empowered to do so. As I begin my story, though, I want to emphasize that this in no way is meant to blame my family or my loved ones. They loved me then, they love me now, and I would never doubt that for a second. My brothers and I, we were raised in what I refer to as a high control group. Others might call this a cult. We lived in an ordinary neighborhood, but we had what rightly can be called a closed culture. My mother, my father, and my stepmother were all raised and lived their adult lives in this group. My grandparents on both sides are also a part of this culture, so this is a big part of my family's heritage. We all were taught to accept extreme religious beliefs. We weren't supposed to have friends at school or with our neighbors because they did not share our values. I specifically remember a time sitting on one side of a chain link fence, passing toys back and forth, hoping that my father would not catch me playing with someone considered a bad associate. We did not observe religious holidays, not even Christmas. Holidays were thought to dishonor the God that we worshiped. This group taught that fathers, husbands, or other men were above women. We were taught from infancy that Armageddon was going to come any day and that our survival depended solely on our loyalty to that group. I went on to marry at age 21 to someone else who was also in the group. We had children and started raising them in this culture. And just like in my childhood, we taught them to be completely separate from the outside world. Now, listening to me, you might be thinking, yep, that sounds like abuse. But when I turned 30 years old, I would never have agreed with your assessment. I would have said, these were a necessary and helpful part of life. I want to say I have a new outlook, though. I realize that experiences like mine are not the norm. Through research and therapy, I recognize that telling women to be in subjection is misogynistic. I have learned that teaching children that someone is going to cleanse the human race is terrifying. I have come to understand these things in my past as adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Now, the concept of ACEs is not my idea. It came from a study in the 1990s. ACEs include many types of traumatic experiences. The study of the 90s showed that there is a persistent connection between an increased amount of ACEs and an increased amount of health and social issues throughout people's lifetimes. With more ACEs come biological reactions that are triggered in children's bodies due to toxic stress. The brain, the heart, the immune system, and metabolic regulatory systems of children are all affected when they have an adverse childhood experience. Now, ACEs are not limited to emotional abuse. They do include other things too. But according to experts, emotional abuse can be a stronger predictor than physical abuse when it comes to future health issues due to toxic stress. This is really bad news. It means that unseen traumatic memories are at least as connected to future health problems as our physical wounds or bruises. So what can be done to reduce toxic stress that comes from emotional abuse? Let's begin by identifying what abuse is. Abuse can include rejecting, shaming, isolating, terrorizing, ignoring, corrupting, verbally assaulting, overpressuring, harsh disciplining, or even witnessing family violence. Let's look at 3 specifically. Rejecting is not acknowledging a child's worth or giving legitimacy to their needs. Isolating is basically making a child feel all alone. Cutting children off from normal social experiences or preventing them from making friends will do this. Verbally assaulting includes name-calling, threats, and sarcasm that continually diminish a child's self-esteem. You may be thinking of extreme examples of these, and those are not good. But what I want to emphasize tonight are the subtler forms of these aspects of abuse. Maybe you've heard phrases like, "You're being too sensitive," or "Everything's okay, stop crying," or "It was just a joke, get over it." These are easy to say as we are trying to navigate conflict or maybe even soothe our child during a meltdown. But they are examples of emotional abuse. Instead, could we say, "I didn't know that bothered you," or "I'm here with you. We'll get through this together." Or maybe "I tried to be funny, but I can see I hurt your feelings." These adjustments in communication create connection with our children and our loved ones rather than toxic stress. Next, I'd like to share with you a little bit about what I've learned about why emotional abuse happens. It's not caused by just one thing. It can be connected to emotional disorders, personality disorders, poverty, and other things. What I'd like to emphasize is that ACEs can be traced back to an intergenerational cycle of abuse, where generations are connected or linked by trauma. The trauma history of parents will transfer to their children. For instance, if your parents were very demanding of you, you may feel like a bad parent if your children aren't behaving perfectly. Then you might employ harsh discipline methods to correct this. Now, the perfectionistic tendencies have been successfully passed from one generation to another. Due to the intergenerational nature of ACEs, supporting families in our community is critical to disrupting the cycle of abuse that leads to toxic stress. The CDC and Harvard University's Center on the Developing Child have recommendations for communities to use. They include strengthening economic supports through social programs, as well as therapeutic interventions. There are further detailed, very good information on their website, but it boils down to the idea that everyone needs adequate resources and a supportive community, especially those of us who have experienced trauma. 2 years ago, I made big changes to my way of life, and I left the faith group. The rules of this group require my family and all my former friends to shun me completely. If we happen to walk past one another at the grocery store, they will give me a wide girth and even avert their eyes. We're totally disconnected. But things are looking up. I'm going through a process which amounts to re-entry into my community here in Moorhead. I am feeling connected again. I found a therapist who suggests strategies that empower me to implement new life skills As I've asked for help, people have shown me kindness without hesitation. For instance, a former coworker showed me how to replace my wiper blades in a storm. She sends me beautiful photos of the sunrise and is a shoulder to cry on if I need one. She has taught me about the transformative connection of friendship. My ex-husband and I are working as a team to co-parent our beautiful children with minimal tension. We're connected in a better way. My mother has decided to leave the group. We are redefining our family and discovering a new connection to one another. Lastly, I'm connecting to myself in new ways too. I'm learning how to dance. I enrolled at MSUM, and I recently gave my children their very first Christmas presents. We are here today to think about connection. Abuse does not have to be the death knell to anyone's future. The power of connection is key to better communication within families and to disrupting the intergenerational cycle of abuse. I am living proof of that. I feel a deep sense of gratitude to how connection has impacted my life and continues to change it. Please take a moment to look around you. Notice we are all in the same room together, but more importantly, we are all connected.